just knowing that you both worn many hats, I thought it'd be fun to kind of talk a little bit about like what is the typical role of a VFX producer. Because again, I feel that's one of those things a lot of people might find a bit ambiguous in terms of like, well, what do they do all day? I just, or even an EP, it's like I just see him on the phone and have lunches. Like, what's up with that? My EPs
It's
can
hard.
be
It's harder
quite
than it looks.
noisy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
But for a VFX producer, at least, do you want to talk a little bit about that, doing script breakdowns and pricing treatments?
yeah. So the producer role, I think it's similar to the the film or TV show producer role as well, where essentially you're the gatekeeper of the budget and the schedule. And after you do it enough, you realize those are kind of the same, especially in a market like visual effects, where so much of your cost is labor. And I think a lot of that probably is a lot of people are surprised by that because it seems like such a techno wizardry industry, but really the vast majority of your cost is going to be labor cost. And so managing your labor and your human resources is essentially what the job is. So you're looking at a script, you're going through and you're seeing like, hey, this is going to be a visual effects shot. This is, sometimes they call it out. Sometimes the client lets you know like, hey, that one location's not really working. We're going to need some help there. Oftentimes we like producers to go through that with a visual effects supervisor as well, or at least get an opinion from them as they're doing a breakdown. So you can talk about methodologies and things like that once you start to put prices to it. But generally what we're going to do is the producer is going to look at any given shot or sequence and say, well, what series of tasks is going to get us to the finish line on this? And they're looking at historical data, what they know about the industry, what they think the client expectations are, and they're kind of trying to balance how much time we can put into any given task, whether that's, a 3D track plus an environment build plus the compositing to do that. Maybe there's some roto involved, maybe there's some paint involved, and sort of combining all those things, that's going to feed into not only a cost for the shot, but it's also going to feed into what the schedule might be, because you've already broken out sort of, okay, this is going to take this much time from these different people, or it could be the same person, but these different disciplines or these different tasks. And then you go through a whole script or a whole sequence or a bid package from a client that they send over, and that all aggregates into a whole number, a certain number of artist weeks or a certain number of artist days or artist hours. And you just try to put that into a calendar, and then you try to manage that once it becomes real, and then tweaking it as it goes along, because there's always going to be changes.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess just while on the topic, and I won't ask for every single job role in the world, but same thing, like what would be the difference between, let's say, a VFX producer versus an executive producer?
Similar to the VFX producer, but it's sort of a question of scale too, right? So I often function as an executive producer on many projects, which is where the producer would be reporting to me. We're talking about how the show is going, what the challenges are, what the good things are, how's the team performing. We need to make changes, either swapping to other teams, hiring people to add headcount, or making changes if you have to make a difficult choice on somebody, making those choices together. And then also it's about relationship management. And that's a key part of it that I think particularly many young people don't necessarily understand to a certain degree or don't appreciate as much. And it goes back to the opportunity thing that I mentioned earlier, which is really about what's the role that the studio is filling for this client, and are we fulfilling that role? And so sometimes it's as simple as just checking in and saying, hey, how's the team performing? Anything I can be doing that would make it a better experience for you, for example. And as simple as that sounds, it's actually really hard to do well, because when they give you an answer that's not roses, then you have to take action in some form or another. And that could be talking to your team. It could be trying to either inspire them, train them, motivate them. It could be making a change in methodology. It could be proposing a change in personnel. Like, all these things are possible, but it's essentially about people management and relationship management at that point.
That's great. For anyone who is looking to become a producer and go down that career path, what advice would you give for how they could get started, whether it's coordinator or any other kind of role?
Yeah, a friend of mine mentioned loving people that worked in service industries to hire into production roles. Like, they don't necessarily have to be that great of an artist, but she was like, yeah, like somebody who's like been a really high-end waiter, like I'd really like that person as a producer. Like, you need some technical skills, but as long as you see the show as a table that you're serving, and making sure everyone's got what they need and everything is up to standard, and everybody's happy, and you're informing the kitchen what's going on. And I think it's an apt metaphor, and I think it's actually a good thing. So I oftentimes advise people to do, sales and service jobs are good prep for being a coordinator producer. Coordinator is much more data heavy, so getting familiar with spreadsheets and databases and having a little bit of capacity to learn on the fly and being computer savvy, I think is super critical. But I think the most important thing is just finding a way in, just getting a foot in the door and being super available and super excited to be helpful in whatever way you can, and then letting your own the predilections and idiosyncrasies kind of drive where you end up going, because once you are there and you're experiencing things, you say, oh, I could be good at this, or I could enjoy this, and then putting in the work to like make that a reality, I think, is the key.
That's great.